Anthony Albanese says Australia should not have kicked out temporary visa holders during the pandemic. Forcing migrant workers out has contributed to the current labour and skills shortage crisis affecting a number of industries, and is why migration pathways will be a big talking point at this week's summit. Joining me live is the National Farmers Federation President Fiona Simson. Fiona, good to see you off the back of the Daily Telegraph Bush Summit as well. First of all, migrants. Can you paint a picture of what has happened in the farming agriculture industry since the pandemic and since those migrant workers were told to go home?
Yeah, and I think, Laura, it's important to note too that these are issues that we were talking about well before COVID as being issues for us in terms of a suitable and a sustainable workforce flow for the future, whether they are people from overseas, migrants, or whether they are people here in Australia. But they've certainly been exacerbated since COVID. And so in COVID, pretty much one by one, 10 by 10, 1,000 by 1,000, all the migrant workers departed Australia, and we just didn't see any coming back in. Yeah. And so we now have a huge shortage of people that want to do, particularly the temporary work that we need, the seasonal types of work in Australian agriculture, whether it be picking fruit and veggies, whether it be harvesting grain, as well as a permanent sort of workforce that looks at areas in our processing industries. And we're just not seeing that workforce coming in to fill those gaps like many other industries, and therefore we just need to keep focusing on what we can do to fix that.
Fiona, what's going on here? Is there a bit of arrogance that's not helping in this sense? I mean, we think it's the best place in the world. We think Australia is the best country in the world, and rightly so, but others just seeing it too hard? Is there too many hoops to jump through to come here to Australia, and then are people paid well enough?
Well, I actually think a lot of it is our attitude and the politicisation of the discussion in Australia around a migrant workforce. And it's been really good to see some clear outcomes coming out already ahead of the Job Summit from the unions and from employer groups, talking about the need to establish that flow of migrants coming back into Australia again, the need to give people some certainty around that policy. I mean, if people don't have certainty when they're in other countries looking at places where they want to work and want to settle, then they won't come to Australia. And if our settings, things even like the backpacker tax, if those settings are not competitive with other countries, then they will vote with their feet and go elsewhere. So I think if we can actually nub out this migration issue, look at the outcomes as opposed to the numbers, which I know a lot of leaders have already talked about. It's really important, and give people in other countries some certainty about what's on offer, how they're going to be paid, what sort of conditions there are, what sort of skills we're aiming at, what sort of skills development we can offer, is there permanent pathways, what about their families, all those questions that we need to answer in a policy sense. Then again, I think we'll see plenty of people, and we know there are plenty of people with an interest in working in Australia in some of the jobs that we've got to offer, and also across a number of our sectors.
Fiona, we don't want this to just be a talk fest. You talk about outcomes and you say there is a lot of goodwill going into this, but sometimes it's hard to see what's actually achieved out of these kind of things. So on Thursday and Friday, what are we actually looking for? Is a number part of that? And what else?
I think the consensus needs to then be taken through by government if we can reach consensus in the summit on Thursday, Friday. And I know there's been a lot of items that are ticked off ahead of the summit, so hopefully less work for us to do on Thursday and Friday. Then those agreed outcomes, if they're agreed between the union movement and industry, then they should be adopted by government. And it would be good to see government, potentially even at the end of the summit, being able to almost list off some of the things that we've agreed on that can be incorporated into any policy, whether it's around migration or whether it's about skills development here in Australia in our regions, which is critically important as well.
Do you think there is a bit of a risk here, and have we seen it already, that this Job Summit is taken over by EBAs and wanting to reform the industrial relations system, where we really need to fix those critical skills shortages and worker shortages?
Well, I think it's a complex situation in which we find ourselves now. It is about skill shortages and worker shortages, but it is also about the complex nature of our industrial relations systems. It is also about how we portray ourselves and what policies we have in relation to being able to negotiate some of those EBAs, or alternatively to give people confidence that they're absolutely going to be paid properly and treated properly. So I think it's not going to take just one thing. I think it is going to be a multi-tiered and a multi-pronged approach. We have four challenges that we've identified in relation to migration, in relation to industrial relations, in relation to skills, and in relation to the opportunities that we can show and how we portray our industry. And so if out of the summit there came a number of, I think, agreed outcomes that went to all of those four challenges, then that would be a really good thing for agriculture, because we think we've got a lot to offer. We think we've got a lot to offer in terms of regional growth. We think we've got a lot to offer in terms of actually being able to fulfil the needs of some of the people who work in our industry. And we really want to be welcoming as an industry, but we need the settings, the government policy settings, to make sure that they can support us, whether we're appealing to Australians or whether we're appealing to people from other countries who want to come in and do the jobs that we have on offer.
Just before I let you go, this grey nomad idea and letting more older Australians work before their pension is affected, or indeed veterans, how big a part of the solution is that?
I think it's a really exciting new idea that's a win-win-win-win. It's a win for the people who want to do the jobs. It's a win for the employers that have the jobs. It's a win for regional communities as these people get a little bit more money in their pockets to spend in those communities. It's a win for the government because they'll be paying their taxes and contributing GSTs. And so to me, that is one of the brave new ideas. It was good to see Matt Keane in New South Wales supporting that this morning. We supported Rebecca Sharkey, member for Mayo, and her bill. I think it's a great idea. So let's not worry about who put it forward. Let's get government to adopt it if there's broad agreement about it. We've been deluged with people ringing our offices and saying, we want to do it, we want to do it. So that's a great new idea with a great new opportunity that's going to maybe open up jobs for hundreds of thousands of Australians.
Yeah, we will see if they can put politics aside and adopt that, Fiona. Fingers crossed. Not always works that way, but you know that. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks, Laura.